All right. So week 3 of the NFL is here, everyone. And I want to make sure we go through every game, kind of talk about some of my favorite players. So make sure we guys are excited and ready. Go through some of the injuries as well. There are a lot of injuries right now that we do have to deal with and obviously overcome. So make sure you guys are prepared for that. So again, I want to make sure everyone is ready for that, because that is something we've got to play a factor in. So a couple things I want to look at is we're going to go through each game one by one. And if you guys have questions, of course, hit me up in the comments down below. That way I can help you guys out. I will be jumping into every game just to kind of give you some insight of how I think each start should be, and what players I really like this week. So the first player, we're going to jump into the Bears and the Colts game. As far as injuries, Keenan Allen is out. That's probably the only really big one. Josh Downs is in. So just so you guys are aware, he is in, which is awesome. Good news for, I think, the Colts, even though I'm not super excited for Anthony Richardson. We're not really sure how he's going to play this upcoming game because I think realistically the Bears defense is phenomenal. And I think they deserve a lot of credit for what they've been able to do, even though the Bears offense really hasn't been great. So that's something to kind of consider and play and think out. But as far as starters go, on the Bears side, you're going to put in DJ Moore. Even though, again, Caleb has not played well, I would sit Caleb Williams this week. Depending on your backup quarterback or what you've got in your lineup, I would consider even sitting Anthony Richardson. I'm not crazy. I'm not in love with his matchup this week, so I would consider sitting him if possible. Right now, there hasn't been an updated news. At least I have not seen anything updated with Michael Pittman. So I'm waiting to see if he's questionable. We'll see if he ends up playing. But even then, I'd still consider Pittman a sit if you have better options. Good morning. Let's see. VP Pineapple. I got a couple questions. Kincaid or Andrews? I like Andrews slightly, and I only slightly. You can't go wrong with Kincaid at all. I think Kincaid obviously has, this is a game for him to turn it up, but I think Andrews is a safer bet against Dallas. There's a lot that Dallas has to deal with. Their defense, still some question marks, even though they had a great game week 1. A lot was shown in week 2, and I think they tend to over pursue, and I think that's a benefit for Andrews in the middle. So I give him just a slight edge on that one. So nothing super crazy. Again, as far as the Bears, Colts, you're going to start Jonathan Taylor. You're going to sit DeAndre Swift. I think DJ Moore is probably the only player I feel comfortable starting in that matchup. And then, like I said, on the Colts side, I'm probably going to lean Jonathan Taylor, maybe Anthony Richardson if you're looking for the upside of his rushing ability. But other than that, I'm not really super crazy about it. I think it would be a fun game between the two young quarterbacks, but other than that, I'm not super excited as far as the fantasy side of things. Jumping into the Chargers-Steelers game, Chargers and Steelers. That one, as far as this game, Justin Herbert should be playing. Nothing that I've seen, at least updated, of him being out. He is dealing with that high ankle, so that's going to limit some of his mobility, could even affect some of his throws. So I'm not crazy with Justin Herbert. I don't like Quentin Johnston this week. I don't like maybe J.K. Dobbins. Probably has some value still. I still would put him in your lineup if possible, just because I think he still has the ability. Jumping onto the Steelers side, I would say Steelers, you're going to start, Najee Harris. I still like this matchup, even though the Chargers are the number 1 defense right now in the NFL. So I would have some hesitation, but I still think Najee's a decent start. I wouldn't be starting Justin Fields unless you're in a really deep league. I wouldn't be starting, even George Pickens unless you're in a really deep league. Start 2, 1 running back, 1 flex. Pollard, Moss, DK Metcalf, or Higgins. So the running back, I would start Pollard. I like his matchup against Green Bay. And as far as the flex, the safe bet is DK Metcalf. I like the upside of Higgins against the Commanders, but I don't know if the Commanders keep that game close enough that it matters. So I would go DK Metcalf. Perine or Steele. See, I've gone back and forth. I think, depending on this Kansas City game I think Perine has the best value in PPR, because if Kansas City and Atlanta actually have a decent amount of, points in this game and they're forced to throw, I think Perine ends up being the guy. Carson Steele gets the first shot at it. He is essentially the starter coming into it, and Steele also is probably going to be the red zone guy. So he is boom or bust, but I think Perine of those two backs would be the better upside because of the catching ability. I mean, he's going to be utilized in the game, and I think Kansas City and Falcons are actually going to be a decently scoring game. I don't think Falcons just give up, the opportunity to try to beat the Chiefs on a Sunday night. We'll see if Kirk Cousins can do it again, because Kirk Cousins is not known for a primetime guy, but he ended up beating the Eagles, and now he's got another primetime game. So it's a big test for the Falcons, but I would go Perine. I do like what Steele I think may provide for the Chiefs, but we'll see. That's a really interesting backfield. As far as the Eagles Saints, going back and forth, I've gone back and forth in this game. So Olave I like, and I've not been crazy about him, but I like Olave this week. I like Devonta Smith this week. You could even put Goddard in there if you need to. As far as tight end, Taysom Hill is out. So if you guys have Taysom Hill, make sure you guys are taking him out of your lineup. He has been officially ruled out. Obviously, AJ Brown is out. You're going to start Saquon Barkley, and obviously you're going to start Alvin Kamara. As far as the quarterbacks, I think both quarterbacks deserve to start. I think Derek Carr has been on a hot streak, and I think he continues that against Philly. Philly's defense has not proven anything since last year at all. They have continued to have some issues, and until that improves, I think Derek Carr is a must start this week, and I think obviously Jalen Hurts, just because, again, his rushing ability is always going to be there. They're going to start against the Saints. So I personally will be rooting for the Saints. Even though I hate that they beat the Cowboys, I do need the Eagles to lose. Jumping into the Packers-Titans game at 1 o'clock. Not a fun game to I would say fantasy-wise. I think Pollard is a good start this week. You could put Ridley in there. I think Ridley will obviously be covered by Jair Alexander, which is tough. I'm not starting Will Levis. I'm not starting Malik Willis. He is starting. Jordan Love is officially out. I know there was like a possible chance. I think that was just more for just to kind of get into the game plan a little bit for the Titans. But Pollard is definitely a good start. Josh Jacobs, because he saw 32 touches, and I don't see why he won't see the ball again. If you want to be a sneaky play, I would say Dobbs is a decent sneaky play, or Reed, but I don't love any of the receivers in that one. What do you think of Vidal's future this season? I'm not sure how that's going to play out, because I'm not sure. I was looking at, where was he? I had him in one of my dynasty leagues because I thought he was going to be a good play, and he has not really turned out to be what I thought he was going to be. So I think he had, where was he? I had him up here. I thought he was going to have some value in that backfield, but because of the emergence of Dobbins, and Gus Edwards still continues to get the start and continues to get the touches, I don't know if they're going to introduce him. I think it plays out if the Chargers have, a rough season, but they started off 2-0, more than we had thought or anticipated. But I don't know. He's definitely a deeper league hold. If you got taxi space, then obviously hold him, but I don't know how much of a future he has the rest of the season. I think if he gets traded, I think there's certain running backs I think probably will end up getting traded this year. Tony, Evans or Shaheed? I'm going Shaheed. I like Evans, but I don't love Evans' matchup against Patrick Surtain, and I think Surtain's going to follow him all game. I think Surtain's a really great cornerback, and he does a really good job against the ones. I think Godwin has a good game, but I like Shaheed. I think he's got a better upside. And then Kyron or Brian. I like in this game because of, I think just they're going to have to obviously try to establish the run. I like Kyron Williams just a little bit more. They're going to have to. They're going to have to establish the run if they have any success against the 49ers. With those that receiving core is not where you would like it to be. DeMarcus Robinson is going to be your one. Whittington, I think, is a nice sneaky play if you guys want to have a nice little, surprise play. I think he's going to be a good one, but I would go Kyron. Back to the games, I would we're going through, Dobbins or Kyron. I'm going Dobbins. I just think Dobbins it's a tough matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers, but I would go Dobbins over Kyron, just slightly. Kyron, again, like anything else, if the 49ers just hone in on stopping Kyron Williams because they want to see what these receivers would do, I would say, I think Dobbins has the better matchup. I think he's just going to have the better game for sure. he's looked really good. I mean, there were a lot of uncertainties with his injury, but he's looked really, really good. So he's definitely the surprise of the season for sure. Which quarterbacks do you think will be traded in the upcoming weeks? I don't know if there's going to be any trade. I think Bryce Young needs to be traded. I don't think he will be. I could see Jameis Winston getting traded. I think Cleveland likes him. I think they like him as a locker room guy. But I think for teams like Miami who want to, I mean, this weekend will determine if teams are going to make some plays. But, you know, with Miami, you got Skylar Thompson. I know they obviously picked up Tyler Huntley, which Huntley has done a fairly good job filling in. You know, when Lamar was out, I think Jameis would have been a great pickup for anybody who's got to deal with quarterback situations. But I do think he's probably the biggest name when it comes to a trade. I think Bryce Young needs to get traded. I think Bryce Young needs to go to, I wouldn't say the Giants. I know a lot of people talk about the Giants. I don't think that's going to help him in any ways. I don't think that's the coaching staff you want to put him in. If you're going to put him in somewhere, I would put him in a coaching staff like, you know, I'm thinking overall, where he can learn. He doesn't need to start this year, but it could be a nice little like journeyman. I think Bryce Young needs to go to Pittsburgh. I know they have Fields. I get it. They're starting him. But Fields is only there for this year. I think Bryce Young's still under, contract for a couple more years. I think that would be the way I would go. As far as Texans and Vikings, so obviously Justin Jefferson, you're going to start without a doubt. I lean more a little bit with Aaron Jones. I'm not crazy about the matchup, but I would lean him. Cam Akers is a nice little sneaky play. He's available in a lot of leagues. I think last time I checked, he was only rostered in about 40% of leagues. So if you need someone, you need a running back, you need a flex play, I think Cam Akers is a nice one, only because Cam Akers is an offense that's really great. And again, you're going to be in an offense that's going to score points. Cam Akers could be a nice play. He's only a rental for this week because obviously with Mixon back and then, you know, Pierce, obviously when he comes back. But I think Akers is going to be a good one. Vikings, like again, Justin Jefferson, Addison is out. Naylor is somebody I've talked about a few times on my waiver wire video. He's, again, if you're in a really deep league, I think he's a good play. And then when you look at the Texans, obviously you're going to start Stroud. Again, you could put Akers in there. You're going to start, Nico. You're going to start Diggs. Dell, I'm not 100% sold on. I don't know. I don't know what's going on with Tank Dell. I think because of Diggs coming there, I think that kind of concerns me. Is Brian Robinson Jr. a must start every week? At this point, yeah. I mean, he's a solid RB2 with some RB1 upside. So, yeah, I don't see why Brian Robinson wouldn't be necessarily a must start every week. If you're talking, your roster's only 2 running backs and then, 2 or 3 receivers and then a flex. Yeah, he's either a flex play or he's an RB2 every single week because I do think the Washington Commanders will want to run the ball. They want to establish the run, and he is their guy. The only time Eckler comes in is obviously when Washington is behind, which tends to happen so far this season. So Eckler, he has decent value when it comes to, when you're talking PPR because he's been able to get, double digits essentially every week, but he's an RB3 at best. Unless he gets a touchdown here or there. JSN breaks out again this week. I think JSN, I know everyone wants to jump on last week's performance. I was surprised by last week's performance. I will tell you, I was completely shocked. I think shocked more by DK Metcalf than JSN because I thought DK Metcalf was going to get shut down in that game, in that matchup. So I was kind of surprised by that. But as far as JSN's emergence, JSN has the ability and the talent. He's just not in the right offense. And this offense looks like the old offense a couple of years ago when Geno Smith had the season of his lifetime. And I think they're getting back to that, which is only good for JSN and only good, obviously, for Geno Smith. So at this week, JSN, I think, is a wide receiver to, consistent, obviously a flex play. He should be in your lineup consistently. I don't know if he quite breaks out. I do like the matchup against Miami. There's a chance Miami doesn't put up enough points to even justify, the Seattle Seahawks to throw the ball a lot. So we'll see how that goes because, when Buffalo went up big, essentially that team was shut down. So that's always the worst case scenario. You hate when you want teams and games to be competitive because you want your players in the lineup. You hate watching blowouts, especially in fantasy, because there's opportunities of starters getting pulled or game script changes. especially for the wide receiver side. So, it's one of those things. You want a competitive game. I think Miami will be somewhat competitive, but it's in Seattle. I think that's going to be tough. That's a big travel from the East Coast to the West Coast, the furthest you can go, Florida to Washington. So that's going to play a factor. At least it's not cold. At least Miami's, got Skylar Thompson and Tua. So we'll see how things play out. I hope it's a competitive game. It is a 4:00 game. I still think JSN should be in there for sure. So Giants Browns, I looked at that game, as far as players you want to put in, I think Deontay Foreman might be a play, as far as flex goes. I would say maybe Deshaun Watson. I don't know if I would really completely start him, but maybe you want to put him in there. As far as Giants, Neighbors is the only one that you're going to put into your lineup. Other than that, you're not putting Singletary. You're not going to put in, you're not going to put Daniel Jones. You're not going to put Wan'Dale Robinson, even though he's gotten plenty of targets. Neighbors is essentially the guy, and that's it, especially against a tough Browns defense. So, Santana Morning, would you flex Hill, White, or Pollard, have Marvin and Rice at wide receiver 1 and 2 full PR? So, at the flex spot, so Rachaad White, Tyreek Hill, or Pollard. Man, you've got a good roster. I would say if that's it's tough to... If your biggest challenge is trying to figure out which one you want to put, I would say Rachaad White out of those two. So then it's between Pollard and Hill. I like Waddle a little bit more than Tyreek Hill this week, just because of the quarterback change. I think Tyreek Hill's hard to sit because of his talent. I mean, all it takes is for him to have enough of a break. He gets 5-10 yards down the field, and Skylar Thompson's an NFL quarterback. Don't get me wrong. He's going to get the ball down the field. So if he sees that and Tyreek Hill has one big explosive play, you're going to regret sitting him. So the safe play is Hill. Yeah. So Tyreek Hill is the safe play. I don't want to question myself in it because I think I think like you. I think you're thinking too much about it. Again, Rachaad White, I think he's losing some of his touches to Bucky Irving anyways. He's not very efficient behind that offensive line. He's only been had saving grace because of his PPR, and he's obviously a good receiving back. But that, I would say, yeah, Tyreek Hill. Pollard's tempting. I think Pollard's done a really good job. I didn't know what to expect for Pollard going into the season for Tennessee because I thought realistically they were truly going to use both backs, and they are using Tyjae Spears, but Pollard has definitely emerged really well behind the line. And that says a lot. You look at Derrick Henry, who went from Tennessee to the Baltimore, who everyone was excited for, right? You're in that crazy good offense in Baltimore, but then Derrick Henry struggled. And I get a lot of it has to do with the fact that there's a lot of nuanced offensive pieces on that offensive line, and it takes some time to gel. But I will say this, that Tennessee offensive line has done a really good job. And it showed. Derrick Henry's done great behind him. Tony Pollard's done a really good job behind him. So I think that means something. So Pollard is tempting, but I'm taking Tyreek Hill in the flex. Back to the Dolphins game. You're going to put, obviously, you got to put Waddle. I still think you start Tyreek Hill, but expect his, production to dip a little bit. I still think he's going to be a solid wide receiver too this week. You're going to put Achane in. Obviously, Seattle, you're going to put Zach Charbonnet in. You'll put JSN in. And I think, if you got him, put DK Metcalf in. I like Geno Smith a lot this week too. Yeah, Pollard is so tempting, but Hill is so hard. He is such a talent that you don't want to put him on your bench. You put Pollard in. Pollard gets you 12, 15 points. You feel good about it. But then Hill has 25 because he had some crazy, reception. So, yeah, it's tough to put him in there. We're looking at the Bucks and Broncos at 1 o'clock. So Broncos are in Tampa. There's nobody I want to start on the Broncos side at all. I mean, unless you're talking defensive players, and we don't really talk a lot about that. As far as Tampa, you're going to start Baker, you're going to start Godwin. I am hesitant to start Evans, but again, depending on what your roster looks like, you're probably going to put him in your lineup. But if you've got better receivers, I would put Evans on the bench. And then Rachaad White, if Tampa's up enough, obviously Rachaad White has some value. You're going to put him, I expect him more as a wide receiver 3 with a low wide receiver 2 floor this week. I do think the Broncos are a decently good defense. And I just, again, like I mentioned, I don't think Rachaad White has the efficiency to be really good. Panthers, Raiders at 4 o'clock. Raiders. As far as that, you're gonna start Devontae Adams. You're gonna start Zamir White. As crazy as that sounds, because I've not been a fan of him all season, but this is a great matchup against Carolina. As far as the Carolina side, you've got Andy Dalton now starting at quarterback. So that means something. You know, he's a veteran quarterback. He knows defenses really well. I would not be surprised if like Deontay Johnson has a good game and people are going to go crazy for him. I think Thielen could actually end up having a good game as well. So those are two sneaky plays, you know, Thielen and Deontay against the Raiders. Again, Devontae Adams for sure. I think you're going to put him in your lineup. I do think you should put Zamir White in your lineup just because I think he's got a decently good matchup. When you're jumping into the Ravens and Cowboys at 4:30, that should be a fun one. So this is a big game in Jerry World. You've got Dallas, who you're going to put CeeDee Lamb in. You could put Dak Prescott if that's your quarterback. I have Dak outside of my top 12 this week against Baltimore. In Baltimore, as far as that lineup, you're gonna put Lamar Jackson. You're gonna put Zay Flowers. You're gonna put Mark Andrews. I'm not crazy about Derrick Henry. I do think Dallas' defense is still good enough. I know everyone's going to go crazy because what happened last week with Alvin Kamara, but they run a different style. Their offense is meant to take very aggressive defenses and have them over pursue, and that's what ended up happening. And I think this week's going to change a little bit. So I know everyone's going to start Derrick Henry, but I would not be surprised if Derrick Henry just puts up like 10 points. Like, would not be surprised. Unless he gets near the red zone, which is obviously very doable and definitely there. But of those players, I still think Zay Flowers, Andrews, Lamar are my favorites when it comes to the Baltimore Ravens. Again, for Dallas, CeeDee Lamb. Jake Ferguson, I think, is a good one if you need to. I know a lot of people have been waiting for him to come back after missing some time. So those are some of the players I like this week. 49ers, Rams, 4:30. Man, that's going to be a tough one. You're going to start Kyren, even though I do think he can have a really bad game, unfortunately. I am nervous for that one. As far as Matthew Stafford, not starting him. I'm not putting in Demarcus Robinson if I can help it. I do think he'll get some targets, but I would try to help that. As far as the 49ers side, you're going to put, I do think Purdy could have a good game. You're going to put Brandon Ayuk in this one. You're going to put Jordan Mason in this one. Kittle is out if you guys are not aware. So again, he's not playing. Lions, Cardinals at 4:30. I think it's going to be a really fun game. It's probably the best one. I think today you got Goff. I think he's going to have a resurgence game. I think this is the game he actually ends up having a good one. So I like Jared Goff. I do like, obviously, Amon-Ra. You still got to put Laporta in, even though he hasn't played well. Jameson Williams at this point has deserved a start every single week. And then, of course, Jahmyr Gibbs and Montgomery. You got to put almost that whole offense. As far as the Cardinals, obviously Marvin Harrison Jr., I think this is a good matchup, even though Lions defensively have done a pretty good job in the secondary. And then Kyler Murray. James Conner might be one I would kind of, if I have some other options, might change. I don't know if I'm going to put James Conner in, depending on what my roster looks like. As far as the Sunday night game, again, Chiefs-Falcons, another prime time for Kirk Cousins, so good for the Falcons. They're getting exposed, which is awesome. I'm not crazy with Drake London this week. I think McDuffie's a really good corner. I think the defense is going to smother him. I think Kyle Pitts has a decent game, actually. I like Pitts' matchup a lot better against this team. Their linebackers aren't great in Kansas City, so, again, Pitts should have a good game. Bijan, you're going to start maybe Kirk Cousins, but, again, Kirk Cousins I have outside my top 12 in my rankings. Kansas City, you're going to put Patrick Mahomes. You can't go wrong with either back, but I think Perrine has the bigger upside. Steele has to get a touchdown for him to have any value. And then, of course, you're going to put Rashee Rice as well, and then Travis Kelce. I know Kelce has not played well. I get it. I'm sorry. I wish he was playing better, but he has not. But I would still put him in. We've got 2 Monday night games, so that's going to be a fun one. 2 Monday night games. You got Jaguars and Bills, which is the first one. That's a 7:30. As far as that game goes, I would look at, as far as the Jaguar side, I think this is a game where Strange might have a decent game at the tight end position, filling in for Evan Ingram. Travis Etienne, maybe. Again, Etienne, you're relying on the reception side. I'm not in love with his matchup, but I still think you're going to put him in as a solid RB2. And then Buffalo, looking at Buffalo, I want to say I like Kincaid's matchup, but Jaguars have done a pretty good job against the tight end. So, You're just hoping he gets plenty of targets his way. So again, Kincaid maybe. James Cook you're going to put in. Josh Allen you're going to put in. Feel confident in those guys. At the receiving core, I like Khalil Shakir a little bit more than I like Keon Coleman. I just think Shakir's obviously just established that relationship between himself and Josh Allen, so that's going to be where you could get the targets. And then the last Monday night game is going to be the Commanders versus the Bengals. So as far as this goes, T. Higgins is playing, so great news for anybody who's been holding on to him this season. So Higgins should be a play. Jamar Chase should be a play. I do like, obviously, Joe Burrow to have a decent game this week. At the running back, Zach Moss, again, don't expect more than an RB2 role. I do think he's going to be great as far as them being up on Washington, where it allows Moss to obviously have some success on the ground, and they run quite a bit more. So, again, not a bad start. And then, obviously, when it comes to the Commander side, I don't love Terry McLaurin, and I could put Jaden Daniels in this one. I think Jaden Daniels ends up being a top 10 quarterback this week just because of his rushing ability. I do think he throws a touchdown. I know he hasn't had that success, but I do think he has a touchdown this week. So I like him a lot as far as, again, a top 10 quarterback in fantasy. So that's kind of the rundown of all the games this week. There's, again, remember, 2 Monday night games. As far as injuries go, look at the latest reports. I was pulling up some of the stuff. Nothing super big that a lot of people have to be concerned with. Obviously, Taysom Hill is out. Jordan Addison is out. Jordan Love, if you guys aren't aware, I know he was questionable, but he is officially out. Do not start him, please. Any other big names, I would say nothing super crazy. Obviously, there's some defensive side that you got to worry about. Defensive players, if you're in IDP leagues, make sure you pay attention to some of the players there. You're still dealing with obviously a lot of injuries this season so far. You got your big receivers like Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua and AJ Brown. Like those guys have been out. As far as, any other spots, I'm not sure if there's anybody really bigger than that. Obviously Christian McCaffrey got to keep an eye on. We'll see how that thing plays out. A lot of these guys you're going to be holding on to for sure, on your IR as long as you can, because some of these guys like, AJ Brown and Cooper Kupp and all these guys will have some big games for sure, when the rest of the season kind of starts. But nothing that I would say is out of the ordinary that I would be overly concerned with when it comes to your lineups. So I'll be on here for about another 15 minutes because obviously I got to get my own lineups ready and to go for the games, get some food before game starts. So I will be on until about 12:15. So if you guys do have questions, let me know. If I am off, make sure you guys have questions as well in the comments, or of course follow me on X. I'll be answering lineup questions there as well up into game time. So I'll be, answering those as best I can, as fast as I can. So make sure you guys obviously ask questions there as well if you haven't asked already. I think most of you guys have probably hit me up on X already because I started that early this morning. But again, I wanted to hop on here, kind of go through each game, kind of talk about some of my favorite players, some players I don't like this week. So again, I'll be on here until about 12:15. And there should be some really good games. I'm looking forward to a few. I'm looking forward to, I think, the Saints and Eagles. I think that's going to be a game that determines if the Saints are actually a legit team. Even though the Eagles defense has not played well, and obviously the Saints have an offense that's been scoring. I'm looking forward to the Lions-Cardinals game. I think that's going to be a really good and fun game. 2 high explosive offenses that, we're talking like NFC, like championship type of thing. I think that could be, I could see where the Cardinals get to that. Falcons and Chiefs, I think it's going to be a good game. I think there's going to be a lot there to determine if Falcons are actually a legit team in the NFC. And then, of course, Dallas, I want to see Dallas versus Baltimore. This game is huge. Baltimore is 0-2. If they're 0-3, there's a high chance they're not going even going to the playoffs. And that will be just devastating for that organization. Dallas, they have games like this where they just don't play well. They're at home. They typically play well at home. They obviously stunk it up last week. This is a big game for Dak Prescott and Dallas. Like, if you can beat Baltimore at home, I think that says a lot about the team. I know people are going to downplay it because they do this every time. Because when you have teams that are, they're not good. Well, no, Baltimore's a good team. They're just not playing very well. So we'll see how things go. But I do like that matchup as well. I think that's going to be a fun one. Those are probably like the big matchups today. You do have obviously some new quarterbacks playing today. You got Andy Dalton playing today, for Carolina, obviously with Bryce Young being gone on the bench. And then you've got Skylar Thompson playing for Miami with Tua being out. And right now, they are not talking about trying to trade for anybody. So they're believing in Skylar Thompson to have some success for them. So we'll see how things play out there. Justin Fields is getting the start. Russell Wilson is still out. I think essentially with the injury and what's happening, and I think they're not really pushing it. So I do think that this is kind of Pittsburgh telling everybody that Justin Fields is going to be the starter the rest of the year. I don't think Russell Wilson gets it back. So we'll see how that goes. But again, something to talk about. And then I'm curious how Carolina is going to play with Andy Dalton. So I'm not sure how that's going to really do for them. I'm curious how, Matthew Stafford's going to perform. That's another matchup I'm interested in because, you're down to your third and fourth string wide receivers. They haven't made any moves to try to get anybody. We'll see if they actually end up making moves depending on how severe the injuries are for Cooper and Nakua. I do think that both will be back this season, so that's great. But depending on how bad these injuries are and depending on how the Rams are performing, there's a chance that they may not have a reason to put those two players in if they're not performing well. So we'll see how things play out with that. I'm really curious about how Tampa Bay performs. I do think Baker Mayfield has really established himself as the starter, and I think he's done a really good job in Tampa. I think he's really truly found his home. So I'm curious how that game's going to play out because I'm kind of slow. I'm secretly rooting for Baker Mayfield. I like him a lot. I think he deserved it. I think he's in the right space, which is awesome. And then there are some big players I want to kind of follow. I want to see how JSN does in this week. I want to see if last week was a fluke or not. I want to see how Neighbors performs. Right, Neighbors went off last week. I want to see if he can continue that type of success because I do think he's an elite receiver just in an offense that's not fantastic. So I'm curious how that plays out. I think he's got a tough matchup against Cleveland. And then I do want to see how Malik Willis does because this is his opportunity to really show that he deserves to still be in the NFL. I know he's backing up Jordan Love. He had a great game last week. This is kind of I wouldn't call it a revenge game. He doesn't really call it a revenge game, but he is going back to Tennessee where he was drafted by. And obviously they went with, a different route with like Will Levis and stuff like that, who has not performed well. Like Will Levis is absolutely losing games for Tennessee. And I don't think it's on purpose, but they're losing games and he has done some dumb, like boneheaded plays. So, if Malik Willis has a great game and Will Levis does not, maybe they secretly kind of regret the decision that they did by keeping Will and trading away Malik. So we'll see how that goes. I am curious how Justin Herbert's going to perform with his, ankle injury. It is something he's got to deal with. I'm curious if it's going to perform his mobility and, of course, his passes. You've got to have a good sturdy base when you're trying to throw the ball, so we'll see how that plays out. So I am curious about that one. And then really no other game I'm like super excited about. I mean, maybe the Bills and Jaguars, if the Jaguars were actually a good team, they have not played well or up to their standard at all, which is driving me nuts because they had high expectations coming into the season, but both Trevor Lawrence has not played well at all, which is kind of disappointing to see. And this game isn't going to be as what I thought it was going to be. Like, I think that obviously I think the NFL had expected the Buffalo Jaguars game to be a lot better, but again, Jacksonville's not played well, so we'll see how that one plays. And then I'm not excited for the Commanders and the Bengals. I am excited for the Bengals to have their full offense back, which is great news. I know missing Higgins, I think, has affected Joe Burrow, and obviously the time away that Jamar Chase has played a factor too. Not being there all off season. So I am curious how that's going to play out. But as far as the Commanders, I mean, I like Jaden Daniels a lot. I think he's going to be a good quarterback. I think he's a big playmaker, and I do think he is somebody you got to defend and really try to work hard to keep from having a good game. But other than that, he's not able to get the ball down the field. McLaurin has not looked great. I thought maybe Luke McCaffrey was going to have a decently start to the season, but he has not. So we'll see how things play out. So I'm getting ready to hop off, guys. If you guys do have questions, again, hit me up in the comments. Hit me up on X. Make sure you guys are subscribed here. Make sure you guys are following me on X as well. I'm going to answer all your lineup questions through that as well. So I'll be doing that up until kickoff. I've got to get my lineups ready to go. So thank you guys who showed up. Thank you guys for asking those questions. Thank you guys for always being